Good afternoon, my friends. This is Paul, and today we're here to talk about the September 2025 Nintendo Direct. This was originally going to be a collaborative effort between myself and Miss Peggle, but unfortunately, I wasn't exactly thrilled with the audio because we were using Game Chat on the Switch 2, and I kept cutting in and out. So I decided that if she wanted to use that audio on her own channel, that would be her prerogative. So I will leave a link in the description if that ends up being a thing. But for now, I decided I was just going to make a video on my own. So the rules are very simple. I'll talk about the games in the Direct that interested me. And in this particular case, since it was over an hour long, I'm only going to talk about new announcements. So if something was announced that we already knew about, but it got maybe a release date or just a little bit more information, then I'm not going to talk about it much. Although, there were a few cool announcements, like Persona 3 Reload getting a demo, and Final Fantasy VII Remake Intergrade getting an updated release date. But with that out of the way, let's get into the highlights of this Nintendo Direct. As a bit of a marketing tool to promote the Super Mario Galaxy movie, Nintendo is re-releasing Super Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 on the Switch. Yes, the Switch 1, so if you have a Switch 2, you don't have to feel left out, and that now means that every 3D Mario game except for Super Mario 3D Land is on the Switch. But for those of us that do have a Switch 2, we get mouse mode, which is going to be really helpful for collecting those star bits, because man, that cursor kept getting out of sync in 3D All-Stars, and it's also going to be able to support 4K. So I already thought that the Super Mario Galaxy games looked great in standard definition. 3D All-Stars made it look even better, and now it's going to look even better. That is just so cool. And they're not just stopping there, there's going to be other new content as well. There are new pages in Rosalina's storybook. Rosalina's storybook simply is going to exist in Super Mario Galaxy 2 now, which I also thought was genius, because during the development of that game, Miyamoto absolutely insisted that Yoshiaki Koizumi, the director, just did not have story in Mario Galaxy 2, because he wanted to get to the point more. So I'm glad that Miyamoto seems to be softening up and realizing that we Mario gamers do like stories in our video games, as evidenced by how much we loved the Thousand Year Door remake and how much story that game had. There's a couple of little extra features here and there, like an assist mode if you're having trouble, and a couple of new textures here and there, but for the most part, it's mainly the same game, just now Super Mario Galaxy 2 doesn't feel left out, and it gets its first proper HD remaster. Now, if you already have 3D All-Stars, I think it really all depends on how much you liked the motion controls, as if you found them tolerable, if you were okay with constantly recentering the pointer, then I don't really see the point in getting this. You might as well just stick to 3D All-Stars, but considering that Nintendo delisted that game, now they're doing damage control, but forcing you to spend $40 for each game and $70 for the bundle, which I think is pretty ludicrous. I would recommend just waiting for them to go on sale or renting them, because the physical version has both games on it, and that's rentable, so you could do that either at a library or GameFly. I personally, if I were to buy them on a sale, I would probably get Mario Galaxy 2, because Galaxy 1 is already on 3D All-Stars, and I think I'm good with that, but I do appreciate that they're at least trying to add a little bit of new content, even if it's not an extraordinary amount. The next Mario Tennis game is called Mario Tennis Fever, and it looks like it's just throwing a bunch of new gimmicks into a tennis game, which isn't always a bad thing. I think gimmicks were what made Mario Power Tennis on the GameCube so cool, and while nothing I've seen so far kind of recaptures those days in my opinion, at the very least it's the next best step, as I think the power shots in Mario Tennis Aces were a step in the right direction, but still really short and didn't feel as wild and wacky and personalized. There are some new mini-games, such as ones that take advantage of the Wonder Flower. You now have the talking flower being the commentator instead of a voice in the void. And what particularly excites me is that when I play Mario sports games, I like to have some kind of narrative. Heck, I like to have narrative in any game I play. So the premise that in the adventure mode everyone is turned into babies and we get the debut of Baby Waluigi is very cool. It is going to be a bit of a bittersweet game though, as this will be the first time in a long time that a lot of the voice actors are being recast, so sorry Charles. But at least with the previous announcement of the Galaxy games, they are keeping the original voice cast. It's not like Charles Martinet is being shafted entirely. Apart from that, I just really liked Mario Tennis Aces, and I'm glad to see more tennis action now with what seems to be an even cooler story mode. Super Mario Bros. Wonder is getting a Switch 2 edition, and the add-on is called Meetup at Bell Bell Park, which looks like it's just a bunch of multiplayer mini-games, so I guess kind of leading into the Mario Party nature of everything, which is kind of cool. Like, I really like multiplayer in 2D Mario games. Haven't tried it too much in Super Mario Bros. Wonder, but if they allow the ghost system of multiplayer that they did in the main game, then I think that might be a lot of fun to be able to play these with online randos. Although, there's also a part of me that also hopes there's just the ability to play against computer players. But they did tease that there would be new content coming to the main game as well, just in case you don't have a Switch Online membership. So for example, they showed the Koopalings, who were surprisingly absent from the original game, and apparently there's going to be a couple of new Toads showing up. I loved Super Mario Bros. Wonder. It was my number 2 game of 2023, and I loved how it just kept surprising me with all the Wonder Flower effects, and it also felt like it was so creative and not quite as play by the numbers as the new Super Mario Bros. Games. So I'm just looking forward to more surprises, and maybe if I'm lucky we'll also get some new music that's performed by real instruments, but I don't want to get my hopes up too much. Personally, I'm going to be renting this. As per usual, I didn't even buy the original game. I just thought it was one of those, it was fun the first time and okay the second time, but it doesn't really have long-term staying power for me, so this Direct has made me really thankful that Gamefly exists. A new Yoshi game was announced in the Mario 40th anniversary portion of it, in a game that doesn't have Mario in it. Okay. But regardless, it looks like this is going to be a sequel of sorts to Yoshi's Story, which was originally meant to be Yoshi's Island 64. So it looks like Yoshi is going to go inside a book, and he can have a Crazy Daisy ride on his back, which immediately makes me think of that one Crazy Daisy in Paper Mario the Thousand Year Door that just always knew how to catch you, and the developers realized that because they patched it out in the Thousand Year Door remake. It doesn't look like there's too much that they've shown that makes this look remarkable. Like when they showed off Yoshi's Woolly World and Crafted World, they were like, hey, look at all these arts and crafts things, but the power of dandelion puffs? The power of flowers? It doesn't look like there's a central hook so far, but then again, I liked Woolly World a lot. And if this is even half of the charm of that game, then I think this new Yoshi game will be pretty spectacular, even if it seems like it's running at a worse frame rate than Yoshi's Story on the Nintendo 64, and I hope going forward that that's just a stylistic choice. The one new third-party announcement that actually got me super pumped was Danganronpa 2x2. Which is both a remake of Danganronpa 2, complete with better graphics, more expressive character movements, so we don't get those stupid cardboard cutouts anymore, and a couple of other quality of life improvements, like more areas that you can explore in 3D, and an overhead map that feels more natural to walk around than just endlessly scrolling like the original did. You could clearly tell that Goodbye Despair was made on quite the budget and for very not powerful hardware, so it's great to have it feel fully realized here, but at the same time still maintain the original art direction. It's just going to be better. And they're also having a reimagining in it, where they take the original characters and the setting, but now it's going to be an all-new story with new victims and new murders and even some new sites. So I am hoping that they get the original cast to reprise their roles, because as far as I'm aware, they're all still alive, and I don't think their voices have changed too much since 2014. It would be great, especially if Todd Haberkorn reprised his role, because while I'm not the biggest fan of Teru Teru, I did get to meet Todd Haberkorn in person at Comic-Con this year, and he sounds like such a cool guy. I like him better than the characters he voices, as a matter of fact. But either way, I'm excited to see what Danganronpa 2 can look like with more powerful hardware, And I'm really, really excited to see the new story. As you know, I love detective stories, so Danganronpa, even though it has a lot of objectionable things in it, I like the detective aspect, and I like how the games promote a sense of optimism as you get further along in the story, coming from the perspective of someone who is very much an optimist. So I greatly appreciate those messages, even if there's a lot of other messages that aren't so great. And this is coming to both the Switch 1 and the Switch 2, so once again, nobody has to feel left out. And finally, the highlight of the Direct for me personally was Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which is, as the name suggests, the newest Fire Emblem, and it takes place in the Three Houses universe, which I'm still undecided whether I like it better than Path of Radiance, but I think at the very least, I like Three Houses' overall setting and its characters a lot more. So it'll be great to revisit Fodlan or wherever it takes place. It'll be nice to see Sophus again, and from what I could tell in the trailer, she's still voiced by Cassandra Lee Morris, because that woman just does not know how to sound old. They didn't show a whole lot of new features per se. At this point, I don't particularly care, because I love Fire Emblem games, and even some of the worst Fire Emblem games have still provided at least some quality to them. And from what I could tell from the snippets, it looked like, or I should say it sounded like, the voice acting is more on the serious side as opposed to joking every other minute in Fire Emblem Engage. So I appreciate that they seem to realize that the fan servicey approach is just not cool, and fans want a more traditional Fire Emblem experience, while at the same time having some innovations here and there. Again, they really didn't show much that we haven't seen before, but at the same time, for me personally, I love Fire Emblem, and you almost never hear me complaining when there's something Fire Emblem related. I was one of the only people online that loved Byleth being in Smash Brothers. So this, for me, was the perfect way to close it out. As far as my thoughts on the Nintendo Direct overall, I think it was pretty good coming from the perspective of someone who has GameFly, and therefore can rent a lot of these games, because man, a lot of the things in here were really expensive or came across as very insulting. I didn't talk about the Virtual Boy because they're requiring you to pay for accessories just to even play them, one of which is $100, which I think is absolutely ludicrous, for games that are only in red and black, forcing you to use stereoscopic 3D, and were considered some of the worst games ever made. Like, why would Nintendo charge that much money for these terrible games that they're not even improving? And then there was the sting of the Donkey Kong DLC when Donkey Kong Bonanza felt like such a complete game, and we all wondered, why would they only charge $70 for that and $80 for Mario Kart World? Oh, that's why. Because they wanted to shoehorn in the DLC that looks like it could have easily just been the post game in the main game, but they decided, what the heck, we'll release it as DLC, because we can't just give people free things. Luigi's Balloon World, in your dreams, guys, now it's the money age. So that is definitely something I will not be buying. A lot of the third-party stuff was either thoroughly uninteresting, or it was stuff we already heard about, which the stuff we did already hear about was cool, like Final Fantasy VII Intergrade, even if I closed my eyes through that because I didn't want to be spoiled. Persona 3 Reload looks great, nice to have a demo. The demo was like 5 hours long, which is really amazing, way better than a lot of the demos Nintendo puts out. And I'm glad that it seems like Mario's 40th anniversary wasn't quite as much of a disaster as his 35th. As far as I could tell, there were no limited releases, and even if I think the Galaxy games are way too overpriced, it's going to be a fantastic rental. So if you have access to something like the library or Gamefly, I think this Direct is probably like a solid B or B+. But if you don't, and you're the type of person that feels like you just have to buy all this stuff or else, this was abysmal. Probably something like a C-, I would say, if you don't have those services, as I'm just really not a fan of corporate Nintendo. It's why I changed my name to the Catholic Gaming Nerd, so that I can be more on the side of the developers. But at the same time, since all of the announcements that excited me on this list were first parties, except for Danganronpa 2x2, I'm glad that it seems like they're at the very least still passionate about making good games. A lot of them were rehashes of games I've already seen, but there's games out there like Fire Emblem Fortune's Weave, which look absolutely incredible. And go to show you that Nintendo, the developers, still haven't completely run out of ideas. It's just that we need to find creative ways to get around Nintendo, the corporation, trying to make us miserable just trying to experience those games. So I just hope that people with the Switch 1 will feel good enough with what Nintendo's still putting out, and those of us with the Switch 2 will appreciate what we have, and that Nintendo at some point in this generation will feel humbled enough that they can continue supporting the Switch 2 while also feeling like they care about the customer's best interests. So with that, thank you very much for watching, my friends. If you disagree with my opinions, I would love to hear what you liked and disliked about the Direct in the comments below. And until the next time, remember to keep the faith, stay epic, and God bless. Bye!